Hi everyone, welcome to World History. Today is Thursday, March 26th. So our assignment for today, you're going to scroll down to this new module called Unit 12, Between the Wars, because we are ready for a new unit. So you need to click on Thursday, March 26th, and we're going to watch a video that I'm doing right now on the Russian Revolution. And then you need to take a picture of your notes and upload to this assignment, Russian Revolution Notes. Okay? All right, so let's get started. So here we are between the wars. So go ahead and update your table of contents. Today is 3/26/20. The topic is Russian Revolution Notes. And again, just put it on the next page. After you do that, I want you to make your page look like this. I want you to put a Venn diagram, but it needs to be big enough to be able to write like 11 or 12 things in it. So if you want to take one page and make that whole page your Venn diagram, and then make the next page this chart down here at the bottom, that is totally fine. So take a minute, pause your video, and make a chart at the bottom of your page with all of these titles, which is what we're going to cover today. And you'll be ready to go. So this standard asks you to determine the causes and results of the Russian Revolution from the rise of the Bolsheviks under Lenin to Stalin's first 5-year plan. That is a lot of information. So I'm splitting this lecture into two. So you'll have one part today and one part tomorrow, and then we'll do an activity. So today we are going to talk about the first part, which is the rise of the Bolsheviks under Lenin. But let's go ahead and break up our standard just a little bit so that we know what we are looking at. So the action verbs that we're looking at are determine, causes, and results. Okay, the people and groups that we're looking at are the Bolsheviks, which is a group of people, Lenin, who is a person, a dictator, and Stalin, who is another person and another dictator. It doesn't really tell us the time, but we know that the place is going to be Russia. And we'll talk about the time in a minute. It's around 1917 to 1920s-ish. And then events and things, and you don't have to write this part down. I just wanted to go through this with you to break it up so you could see what we're going to deal with. Events and things is the 5-year plan. This is Stalin's 5-year plan. And another event is the Russian Revolution. And I think we could also add the rise of the Bolsheviks. Okay, I think we've covered everything so we can see what is in this standard and see what we need to learn. So we're going to basically look at the causes and the results of the Russian Revolution. We'll look at these people and the 5-year plan and the rise of the Bolsheviks. Okay, you do not have to write this down. I just want to show you this nice little graphic organizer that's talking about different kinds of authoritarian governments. We've talked about absolutism. We've talked about absolute monarchies, specifically Louis XIV in France. And under absolutism, they do not control all aspects of life. Usually they only control things politically or economically. However, in contrast to that, we have totalitarian governments. And in this unit, we're going to talk first about communism, and then we will talk about fascism with Germany and Italy. Okay, so totalitarian governments seek to control all aspects of life, political, economic, and social. They are controlling everything, and you'll see that in just a minute. But I wanted you to see the difference between the absolute monarchies that we've talked about in the past and the totalitarian governments that start to take over in the 20th century. Okay, so in your Venn diagram at the top of your page, make sure that you write communism and Stalin. And we're only going to fill out this half of the Venn diagram today. When we talk about Hitler, which will be coming next week, then we'll fill out the other side and the middle. Okay, so just what you need to know about communism. Number one, it provides for the needs of the people without having to have money. Okay, provides for the needs of the people without having to really pay for it. They abolish religion, so that means there is no religion. This is also called Marxism or Leninism, and Karl Marx was the person that we talked about who came up with the idea of communism, and we compared and contrasted him to Adam Smith, who talked about capitalism, if you remember. And Lenin is somebody that we're going to talk about, but he's frequently associated with communism. Communism stated that there is no private property allowed. So you cannot own anything. The government is going to own everything. The main names that we need to know for communism include Karl Marx, Lenin, Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and Stalin. We need to know that this is a classless society. Remember how we made those triangles and we made social class pyramids? Well, there is no social classes, none in communism. So it's a classless society. So we'll just take that away. Doesn't exist. Number 7, they do not trust nationalists. Now, remember, nationalists are people who are trying to bring people together, a group of people with similar backgrounds, similar culture, and the communists do not trust nationalists, so they are going to try and attack them. One good thing about communism is gender equality. It is official. Men and women are seen as equal, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And Stalin is not actually Russian. He's Georgian, but I don't care if you write that. You don't have to write that. Number 10 is important, the Gulag camps. We'll talk about those. Stalin was anti-Semitic. That means that he did not like Jewish people. And after it's all said and done, Stalin is going to kill about 40 million people of his own people. So you can see this is not going to bode well for the Russians. Okay, so you can pause this if you need to write it down. Just want to give you a little bit of an overview about what communism is like. So let's talk about how things were before the revolution. So Nicholas II was the last czar, or the last emperor of the Russian Empire, and he spent a lot of his early reign very distracted by his family's concerns. His son, Alexei, had hemophilia, which is a blood disease, and this distraction was exacerbated by the royal family's close association with a man named Rasputin. He was a Russian peasant priest that claimed to talk to Mary and heal the sick. But in real life, Rasputin was a heavy drinker, a womanizer, whose association with the royal family was exploited by their political opponents. So this is Rasputin right here. I mean, would you trust this guy? Look at him. He looks shifty. Okay, so make sure that you write down that Nicholas II was the last Tsar of Russia, that he was distracted by his family. He was controlled basically by a man called Rasputin, and his throne was in jeopardy. Okay? All right, so as I said, Nicholas II was having a hard time ruling, but in addition to his own personal issues, the Russian state was really outgunned as it faced more industrialized nations in war. The first war that they lost was the Russo-Japanese War, and then in the First World War, Russia was humiliated by defeats on a regular basis. So in both cases, Russia's lack of industrial infrastructure and the weak leadership of the Tsar led to the defeats. So also during World War I, there were major food shortages that led to open rebellion in Russian cities. So Russia actually had to leave the First World War, and they didn't finish it because they were having all of these problems at home. So then we get to the revolution. Okay, so these rebellions because of the food shortages, it ended up with a revolution called the February Revolution of 1917. And during this time, the Tsar was forced to leave his throne, and a provisional government was formed. And it's a very interesting story about Nicholas II, who had to leave and take his family with him. And if you know the story of Anastasia, there's also a Disney movie about Anastasia. Basically, the family snuck out in the middle of the night, and they rounded them all up and executed them, all except for Anastasia, who comes back later, and she says, "Wait, I'm Anastasia. I was just a little girl when my family was taken." Anyway, we don't know if it's real or not, but it made a good Disney movie. So the provisional government attempted economic and political reform, but it wasn't good enough for the Russian people. So the Russian people, they wanted peace, but they continued to fight. So World War I kept going on, even though people were starving and having problems. But the government still wanted to fight. There was a large peasant population during this time, a lot of poor farmers. They didn't have industry, so it was very hard for them to manufacture weapons. There was an uneven distribution of land, which meant some people had land and some people didn't. The food shortages I've already mentioned, and massive war casualties during World War I. So all of these things combined together led to a Russian Civil War. So the Russian Civil War came in October of 1917 when the Communist Bolshevik Party, led by Vladimir Lenin, took power in a violent coup. So that means that they overthrew the provisional government and took control. So then there was a bloody civil war that started between the Bolshevik forces, also known as the Reds, and this is a poster talking about Red October, which was the time of the revolution, and you can see the red is featured prominently, and red becomes the main color of Russia because of the Communist Bolshevik Party. So a bloody war ensued between the Bolshevik forces and the Tsarist and Republican forces called the Whites. The Russian Civil War lasted until 1920, when the Reds emerged victorious. So they won. All right, so here begins the communist state. Lenin set up a one-party dictatorship. You know, in the United States, how we have multiple political parties. We have the Democrats, we have Republicans, we have the Green Party, we have Libertarians. So we have several political parties. But Lenin set up a one-party dictatorship. That basically means that you have no choice on who you're voting for. and he began the conversion of Russia, which was now called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR, and he turned it into a communist state. The conversion proved difficult because Russia could not easily conform to the path laid out by Karl Marx in his Communist Manifesto. A couple of the issues were most of the population were peasant farmers. They needed to have urban industrial workers, as per Karl Marx. That's what he said. So they slowly moved to a centralized communist party control. It took them quite a while to convert to a communist state. Then, unfortunately, Lenin dies. In 1924, Lenin dies, and there is a power struggle that emerged between his two close friends, Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky. In 1928, Stalin orchestrated the exile of Trotsky, basically kicked him out of the country, and he took control of the Soviet government. Stalin rejected the gradual path that Lenin had started, and instead he organized a rapid and massive conversion of the Soviet economy and society into his version of communism. So the Communist Party in 1936, the Communist Party declared that it was the leader of the working people in their struggle to build a community society and the leading core of all organizations of working people, both government and non-government, a classless society. No one group, including party leader, enjoyed special privileges in the Soviet Union. All citizens had the same rights under the Constitution, making sure that they were entirely equal, sharing equally in the work and the products of the nation's labor. So you can see here at this propaganda poster that's showing the hammer and the sickle, which is the sign of the Soviet Union or the USSR. You've got a man and a woman standing here equally, a soldier leading the way. So tomorrow we'll do notes that talk about what actually happens after they create communism in the USSR. And is it going to end up happy? We'll just have to wait and see. All right, guys, that's it for today. Have a lovely day. Don't forget to upload your notes, and I will talk with you tomorrow.